just to get things going, I wonder if I could ask Patrick about Kongyang's project. Obviously deals with water, as he's explaining, in a very sophisticated way. Mm-hmm. Is this something that, why would grower be interested in this? I know that you take a very wide view of water, and we've discovered that in some of our other prize winners in previous years. But perhaps you could explain why this level of sophistication, the water used for making a drink and then cleansed and recycled, is of interest to grower.
No, thanks, Jeremy, for the question. We're going to share the answer here together with my colleague Antoine here. But before getting started, a big congratulations for what we've just seen here. So fantastic presentations. And one thing that for us, it's very important to come over here to WAF to sponsor the Water Prize, but also this exchange and this exposure to, again, thought leaderships and the real challenges that the real world is bringing to us. It serves as kind of a tremendous insights for us to bring that home and make better products for everyone. So talking about water is something that's embedded in our DNA as a brand, as part of our brand purpose, our brand claim, pure joy of water. The brand purpose is about enabling everybody to experience the pure joy of water. And this morning, driving here, so together with our Chief Designer Officer, Paul Flowers, we were talking about one thing. Our products touches the lives of over 1 billion people every single day across the world. It gives us a tremendous responsibility because our faucets and showers, they are vehicles to deliver water to people across the planet. And we cannot control how they utilize the water in a kind of way, but through our technologies and through the meaningful designs, we can guide them, we can nudge them. And this is a tremendous thing. Through, elements and technologies such as EcoJoy, that is something that we call, that allow the users to save water while not compromising performance into our showers or our faucets. But also, one thing talking about water conservation, and that's really interesting and links also to the WAF's theme of this year, is about tomorrow, is about the future. How can we start paving something that's going to have an impact in the future, in the future generation? It's a groundbreaking technology in a product that we have recently launched that's called the Grower Eva Stream, which is the first recycling shower. So it's an infinity shower, if one can say, that gives you up to 70% in a 10-minute shower of a saving of water and energy. Allows you to enjoy water without that guilt. We call it's a guilt-free shower, which kind of links with we just learned about the Multi project, and I think, Antoine, you have a point of view in terms of the entry and how does it connected also with Grower, right?
Yeah, first, congratulations. We had a chance to discuss yesterday, and seeing again your projects confirm actually I think the jury, right, anonymous, or the consensus that you should be the winner for this year. So again, congratulations. I think you mentioned holistic, right? And I think it connects also with your project. We were all very impressed by the holistic approach to your project, right? It was very impressive to see how you have literally created a closed-loop ecosystem, right? That integrates water, energy, nutrients. You talk about temperature as well, right? You talk about many things. So closed-loop ecosystem. And on top of that, there was also a very interesting social benefit, because as we could see on the renderings, right, you show that actually visitors, whether they are customers of Multi or not, they can really have a very immersive and enjoyable experience. And it connects also to the way we approach, everything we do at Grower. We also have a holistic approach, so in the way we design the products, in the way we engineer the products. So we have a cradle-to-cradle collection under the Grower brand. The way we manufacture our products, so we have carbon-neutral fitting plants, and even the way we package our products, right? So we already approach sustainability in a very holistic way, and this is why we believe that it was an extremely, extremely connected with the way you approach the project for Multi.
I think just backtracking slightly in time, the essence of the modern industrial city is in cleaning water, because until the 1840s, water supply, sewage were combined. They overlapped. That led to all sorts of diseases, particularly cholera and typhoid, which almost destroyed cities in the West. I mean, London was badly hit, but all big cities were. And I think that what is happening, and I think Melbourne is a bit of an example of that. You say the city, as it industrialized, turned its back on its river because water was seen as a danger. It was seen as a source of pollution, a source of illness, a source of social discontent. And I think being able to transform that by design in your case, but also in what Grow are doing, by technology, by the increasing technology of reusing water. I think the idea of a shower that recycles the water, a bit terrifying in some ways, but I'll try it at some point. Yeah. But perhaps Matt or Scott would like to comment on that in the sense of how Melbourne, as what had been a very finely managed landscape by the indigenous people, then becomes a source of pollution under the settlement period.
Maybe I'll just kick off by saying one of the fascinating drawings we have out of the archives of the Board of Works from Melbourne, who managed the water systems right throughout the entire city in the early 20th century, shows the Yarra River as the number one drain. It's not even acknowledged as a river, it's called a drain. And so, I mean, this is not unusual or unique to Melbourne, but I think it's such a powerful sort of dichotomy that's happening at the moment for us, where we're trying to repair and recover and reconnect with a Indigenous way of understanding the landscape, and such a powerful kind of knowledge system, thousands of generations of knowledge that's being handed down to us through these projects now. So, for those people, they've watched on to see what was the most important thing to them. The river was the lifeblood of their existence. To watch the settlers turn that into a drain, an incredibly polluted system, something that was incredibly unhealthy, and still to this day you can't swim in. Some people do, you shouldn't. I think that's one of the big challenges when we think about water. I think the things that you guys are doing at the source are really important, because this project that we showed you, Green Line, we can't fix water quality through that project, but all the little inputs that happen along the way, the sorts of projects that Konyan's been doing for decades, are the things that can treat water at the source and repair river ecologies right throughout our cities. So I think that's the sort of idea that ties everything together, maybe.
I think it's quite well summed up in Grower's slogan. Is it Freude für Wasser? Am I saying it correctly?
The pure Freude and Wasser, which is the translation. So sorry for my bad German as well. So is the pure joy of water, is the pure water enjoyment in that particular sense.
Yeah, and it's interesting. People do try to swim in the Yarra despite it being basically poisonous. I mean, I remember reading that although there are fish in it in the upper reaches, they're so polluted with heavy metals and arsenic that it would be almost fatal to eat anything.
I was going to say the river is improving, and it's quite frightening to think. If anyone's been to Australia, if you go to the west coast of Tasmania, 2/3 of the rivers you can just get a cup and drink the water straight from the river. The watershed is pure, it is safe, and all of Australian rivers were at that stage safe. And it's through what we've impacted on that water catchment, it's turned our rivers into drains. Since there's been a lot of industry moved out of Melbourne, not because of environmental reasons, but because of economic value of land. So a lot of the breweries and the heavy industry have shifted on, and we are starting to see the river repair itself and improve. And I think this is a really important factor for the project we've been working on, is that we can't get the water back to the stage where you can drink it, but certainly through ecological process, we can see great improvement in what it is.
Konyang, some of the projects I remember you've worked on have almost returned water to a state you could drink it from being very polluted.
Yes. Well, as our colleague just mentioned, water is the key. London is going to build a pipe. You already built a pipe. No,
Yeah.
So we are still have this engineering, industrial thinking, right? Industrialized civilization, drain away or whatever is, whatever, drain away to finish the project, That's going to end. This kind of mentality we have to change. Otherwise, the global will be totally destroyed. Yeah.
And it would be lovely to think that all the water could go back to the state of the Tasmanian rivers where you could just put a cup in and drink it. That's not really practical, I think.
If I'll share one story, a project I did a while ago, and I'm not going to name it in case if there's a lawyer in the room, but we designed a wetland and we took all the water off the roads and ran it through the wetland and stored it in a tank. And when it went through the wetland, it went through a biological process, removed the nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus, stored in a tank. But just to be sure, we ran it through a UV filter before it went through the irrigation system. And all the irrigation pipes were purple. Yeah. Anyway, the project manager phones me up 3 years later saying, we've got a problem. I said, what? He said, the contractor accidentally plumbed the drinking taps to the purple pipes. I went, well, has anyone been reported sick? And he said, no. He said, you don't understand the severity. I go, what do you mean? He says, I've been drinking for that tap for the last 3 years. But the point is a natural system with a UV protection coat on top is fit for public consumption.
Yeah, and I guess this is something that grower could be beginning to look at, like as you're saying with the shower. But you could start perhaps think about, well, how can you recycle other water, even certainly grey water, but maybe even black water that you can, do you do it ecologically through a wetland pond around the house, or do you have some sort of mechanical device that can do it?
So if I can connect back to what you say, Kongshai, you talked about change, right? And I think when Patrick mentioned about EverStream, the challenges we might have with this kind of technology is also about changing the habits, right? The perception, like you said, Jeremy. But I think this is very interesting because whether we as manufacturers try to drive a change, right, in the habits, you're also driving change, right? One thing that I think really was very interesting from the jury perspective is again how you try to drive the change around, that economic growth can harmonize with ecological preservation, right? They can go hand in hand, and that was something that really struck us, right, when we were discussing together with Paul Finch. We were very impressed by that, and eventually what we said is that I think your project almost becomes like a blueprint or a reference, a scalable model that can be used across industry. And that's why we thought that when you talk about change, we were exactly resonating with, again, the way we drive things at Grove.
Yeah. So water, after all, water resources is limited. But actually, the most damage to water is because we invented the toilet. We invented the toilet, and also the production process. So that's the origin of all the destruction, from the household. So it's a lifestyle and it's a production process. So multi-project is beginning from the source, from the production process. We have to fix that problem. And next problem, certainly, we need to fix the toilet. Now, that can be certainly part of your product, but certainly the architect should do that. Architect is the major contributor in this sense, to clean the water.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very interesting point. I remember when, I'm sorry I keep referring to London, but it's the city I know best and obviously has had big issues with rivers and waters. But when the House of Commons was rebuilt in the 1850s, right on the edge of the river, it was uninhabitable because the river was just an open sewer. And interestingly, at that point, members of Parliament thought we might start to vote some money to do something about this. And they announced, in effect, they created something called the Metropolitan Board of Works, which then ran a competition to solve this problem. And what was selected was by an engineer called Joseph Bazalgette, which was what we know now, the sewer that runs parallel to the Thames that's combined with an underground railway and has various pumping stations on the way out to the east. But one of the other ideas, which I always thought was rather interesting but not very practical, was to have a series of radial sewage pipes that took the waste from the toilet to the edge of the city where you have the market gardens. In other words, it recycled the fertilizer from that. And indeed, the loss of that fertilizer as it was washed down Bazalgette sewer, was a big problem for the food supply in London because it had depended on the use of it to supply the growing city with fresh vegetables and fruit in particular. So I think we could come back to something like that because we will need a big scale solution to it. And I'm sure that Grower could come up with some very clever things that would deal with it at the level of an individual household, but actually we need big thinking to deal with it at the level of a city.
If I can say, I think Kongshan, maybe you want to talk a little bit about your sensing technology, because I thought it was extremely impressive the way you approached the use of the technology, right, to show the interplay, right, between the environmental variables and the nature-based solutions in your project. So maybe you want to touch a little bit on that, right?
Yeah, so the technology is a nature-based technology is how can we use nature? All the wastewater actually basically is nutrients, all right? So if you use the industrial process, you use too much energy, too difficult. All the nitrogens, the phosphorus, potassium, actually can easily be removed by the planting process. So that's basically go back to the agricultural process, the production process. How can you make agriculture to link with today's modern, technology? That's the key. I just learned from my, we have this discussion just before I came here. We have about water, wastewater. There's three kinds of water, okay? Yellow water. Most of the nutrient actually in the yellow water, which means urine. Now that's the idea for your company to maybe to create this, separate the urine from the other waste. And second is about the gray water. That's base water. Now that can immediately be reused in the green, right? So we can use 90% of water can go back to the ecosystem quickly. So that may be the key we can test in our design, ecological design.
And we're getting into some, I think, very big territory here because science used to be called, at Cambridge it still is, natural science, which implies a relationship with nature. Cambridge University, you do a degree not in science but in natural science. And I think, until certainly well into the 19th century, what you're saying would have been absolutely common, that most of the great scientists up to that time observed from nature. Think of Darwin, think of Linnaeus, think of other great scientists, the people who discovered dinosaurs, were observing natural phenomena and drawing conclusions from that. And it was in the 19th century as science increasingly entered the laboratory and became a sealed system of reference and ideas that it has cut itself off from nature, and we need to go back to that. And of course, water, as you're saying, is the ideal way of doing that because water is a very common and very natural and very usable, very essential substance.
I was thinking maybe a challenge to companies like Grower is to have a look at the sort of work that we're doing as a body of landscape architects. We sit here as a combined group of landscape architects within an architecture festival, winning awards for water strategy. And I think there's something in what you're talking about, Jeremy, is because the way we think as a profession is systems-based, it's nature-based strategies. And I think, Konyan, that project is almost like the pinnacle of taking a nature-based strategy to solving what you said would have been previously an engineering approach or a high-energy approach to treating water. So maybe are there examples of where Grower or other product manufacturers are experimenting more with biophilic or nature-based solutions to thinking about water treatment as opposed to mechanical systems? I just feel like there's a sort of an untapped opportunity out there. It's complex, but
Absolutely. And for me, the reason why I think we are doing this and we are engaging since years here, is to get an exposure to, again, real world challenges and try to learn from adjacencies in terms of industries, in terms of also how can we together kind of tackle problems that are going to have something that's going to be meaningful. So for us to work into something that's going to be targeted and also learning from nature, as you said. And I remember one of the things, Jeremy, I think it was about 6 years ago that we have one of a filtration, again, using one of the water prizes that, the one I think by Maria in Sao Paulo, that was something utilizing the river and also using a filtration system that was based on nature, that was a similar way that they used to do in Bali, in utilizing like again natural components. That was an absolutely way to help to transform the river into something that the community could utilize, all that you could grow things around it. So again, nature is a tremendous source of inspiration for everything we do, but also I truly believe in this dialogue between ourselves into the manufacturing side, into the design point of view, also with the industry, what you guys with the architecture, with the planners. So who is in the forefront kind of bringing, of creating the landscapes and the environments where our products are going to inhabit in the end of the day, right?
That's interesting. I think what we've seen from certainly from Kong Yang and from Matt and Scott is that the level of landscape design architecture can set an agenda that can then be researched, and that seems to me to be what this prize is about. Is about people who come up with an idea, come up with understanding the nature of a problem, and how can we begin to look at solving it. And that, I think, is something that it's magnificent that GRER support it. We're delighted to have the opportunity to facilitate it, and I think we've had some extremely interesting discussions and contributions to it, both this year and in previous years. So I wonder if any of you have got some last comments, because I'm afraid we're running out of time. We could obviously go on, there's lots more to say, but would you like to make a final comment?
My final comment is again, if we can fix the water, we actually can fix the climate issue. Now that's my last comment.
Okay, right. Antoine.
I go back to actually exactly this panel, right? It's going to take like different actors, right, coming from different perspectives, right, from the way we look at landscape, architecture, products. So also the infrastructure, right? Because when we talk about the Everstream, we talk about a behind-the-wall technology. So it's going to take a lot of actors, right, to reach this kind of goal that we're setting for ourselves.
Good. Patrick.
Once more, for me, the whole point about these discussions is like utilizing the today that we have access to all these insights to design the better tomorrow, right? That links into the WAF's theme as well. Like I think we can bring and we can leave a good legacy for the next generations to come, doing something that is really meaningful for us, right?
Good.
My parting thought is reflecting on a comment that you said, that the problem starts at the home or the source in terms of how we deal with wastewater and waste. It's the same as in Melbourne. The only way we're going to improve the Yarra is we improve the water quality upstream. We can't improve it at the source. But what you said made me think, a while ago I read an article. It was a historic publication of when the US government went to China in 1915 to do a study of agriculture. And what they found is that there was a man who was distributing the waste from Shanghai out to the growing fields. And this businessman had done a deal with the authority in Shanghai and bought all the wastewater for $1 million in 1915. And he was making a profit by selling the wastewater to the farmers. And it's getting back to that fundamental principle of there is a reciprocal relationship between way natural cycles work. And we've gotten a little bit lazy out of comfort, and yeah, that they need to be rethought.
There's almost an analogy between the division between the countryside and the city as between nature and science and the laboratory, I think. Matt, also you to make the final comment.
Very, very brief one. I think this is probably the most important thing that could be discussed at this conference of very bright people coming together. I commend all of the great design that's happening around here, but ultimately we need to get back to, we have a climate emergency, we have significant issues that we need to solve as a design profession, and we need to start thinking about nature-based strategies in our cities that are going to help solve human health crisis, which is strongly linked to economic crises that we're facing in many cities and countries as well. So I would encourage everyone to reframe the way you practice and start thinking about these kind of issues front and centre.
I'd like to conclude this session by presenting the final WAF-X prize to Matt and Scott. Because at WAF-X, everyone is a winner, a bit like the fairground shooting gallery where everyone is a winner.